tubes? Anybody's kid got ear tubes? Well, ear tubes are a way of preventing that from happening over and over and over again. Basically what you do is you come out here into the, put the kid to sleep, make a little tiny incision here in the eardrum, and that lets all the pus out. And then you slip in a little tube, which is not really much of a tube, more than it's just a thing to keep it open. So if this is your tympanic membrane here and you made this little slit in it, you slip in this real little rubber tube that kind of looks like this. And the things on either end are just designed to hold it there so it doesn't fall out. And indeed, in a lot of kids, they'll stay in for 10 years. And that allows their ear, if it gets infected in here, for the pus to drain out here, and so they don't really get an infection. Okay. The other story I always tell about the auditory tube is, how many of you have been on an airplane flight and you go up to altitude and then you start coming down and every kid on the plane starts screaming? It's kind of typical. And the reason is because the kids, these tubes are not as open as they are in us. In us, we can go, and you can actually almost feel the air go in and out of your ear by closing your nose, but you can't get kids to do that. And if you can't neutralize the pressure, you're at really low pressure up high, not terribly low because it's a pressurized cabin, but still it's a lot lower than normal, and you come down to ground level, the pressure increases in here, so the air that was in here starts to expand and it starts to push the tympanic membrane out and it stretches it, and that hurts like crazy, so all the kids start crying. Whereas most of us, we can ventilate that extra pressure out through here.
How come when you swallow it goes away too?
Swallowing does the same thing. It just changes the shape of things down there, and that's often enough just to let a bubble of air come out of there. Okay?
Do those tubes have to be surgically removed, or do they
No.
fall out?
It wouldn't hurt if they just stayed in forever.
Do they have more sensitive hearing or anything?
No, it keeps them from losing their hearing, though. If you get enough infections over and over and over infections in here, these ossicles won't vibrate properly, and those kids can lose hearing.
Why don't they do that for everybody then?
What?
Why don't they do that for everybody?
Well, most people don't need it. It's obviously it's an operation. Anytime you're going to get put to sleep, there's risk to that. Most people don't need it, but some do. Okay, so external ear, middle ear, and inner ear. So there's two main parts to the inner ear. One is the cochlea, which is this thing that looks like a shell, and the fluid in the cochlea vibrates with the vibrations of the ear membrane. That's actually how you hear, because you have all these receptors that are all along the length of the cochlea here that vibrate when the stapes gets vibrated by this being vibrated. It vibrates the fluid in here. The fluid in here vibrates, and it's picked up, and we'll talk about the different receptors that live along the cochlea that allow us then to convert those vibrations into sound. Okay? And then there's also this part, the second part of the system involves these semicircular canals and this kind of open area called the vestibule, and this is the area that interprets motion and position, tells us which way is up, which way is down. This is why you ride the tilt-a-whirl at the carnival, is to get that fluid in those tubes spinning around so you feel sick. And that's why when you get off the tilt-a-whirl, you're kind of like this, or you're vomiting. I don't do that. That's just stupid. Anyway. And you remember that this whole system is funded by the vestibulocochlear nerve, which used to be called the acoustic nerve, number 8. And notice that it has two parts. One is the cochlear part, illustrated right there, and the other is the vestibular part, which goes to the vestibule and the semicircular canals here, and gives us positional sense, and motion sense, and so forth. Closer up look at this. This is the tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane causes the incus here to,
With the malleus.
the malleus here to vibrate. The malleus causes the incus to vibrate. The incus causes the stapes to vibrate. Now notice, because of the way these things are set out, it takes a little tiny bit of motion here to become rather a large amount of motion at the other end. It's just a matter of the levers and the mechanics of it all. And this stapes sits there on the round window and causes the fluid on the other side to vibrate. Notice that there are two muscles here that are very important. The first one is called the tensor tympani, and the tensor tympani muscle does just exactly what it says. It tenses up the tympanic membrane. It tenses up the eardrum. It does that to protect us from very loud noises. Okay, so if there's really loud noise going on, our tensor tympani can kind of form an emergency earplug, sort of, to keep the tympanic membrane from moving so much, and therefore protect this delicate stuff inside. You also have another one here called the stapedius, which you see attaches basically to the stapes here, and the stapedius does basically the same thing. It's a protective mechanism to keep everything from vibrating so much in the presence of a really loud noise. This is a really cool picture. This is from actually inside the ear looking out. So obviously this is probably not a living thing here. But if you notice, there's a light on the other side of the tympanic membrane. This is the eardrum right here, the tympanic membrane. And you notice there's a light on the other side. So somebody's got a light looking down the ear from the outside, and this is from within the middle ear. Kind of cool. You can see all three of the little bones in there. I think I'll stop right there on the vibration of the tympanic membrane. We're going to talk about how we take, and you know, I've said the first two were chemoreceptors, and then the next one was a photoreceptor for our eye. Well, these are all mechanoreceptors. In other words, it's strictly a mechanical thing. There's actual movement, there's actual vibration, and that's what we're going to interpret in order to be able to hear and to be able to do these equilibrium things. Thank you. See you in lab in a little bit.